Oh, g'day, mate. 40 here. So, does Glenn Loury host YouTube's edgiest show? I mean, I just watched his show with the Amy Wax, and Amy Wax said positive things about Jared Taylor. Talks about how she reads American Renaissance, how she disagrees with Charles Murray, that white identity politics may not be such a big disaster. She makes the commonsensical point that if identity politics is good for some groups, then it's got to be good for all groups. So how can black identity politics and Jewish identity politics and Latino identity politics be kosher, but white identity politics is not kosher? So Glenn Loury consistently hosts YouTube's edgiest show. I mean, he had Charles Murray on talking about his new book, Facing Reality, about disproportionate rates of crime committed by various racial groups, and talked about cognitive differences between various racial groups. All right, this was all on the Glenn Loury show. So if you don't know Glenn Loury, he's a centrist black intellectual who shows some sympathy for right-wing perspectives, and he throws his show open to a lot of right-wing thinkers who've been exiled from polite conservatism, such as Amy Wax and Amy Wax and Charles Murray. So Amy Wax said she strongly disagreed with Charles Murray that the white identity politics is just the worst thing ever. And it's interesting that Glenn Loury said that white identity politics would be absolutely awful, but didn't make a particularly strong case for why. So Glenn Loury says we should try to do away with all identity politics, but I think the way we're just wired is that we're wired to identify with our group. Like we're most interested in people who are similar to ourselves. So good on Glenn Loury though for hosting Charles Murray and Amy Wax. So Amy Wax got into trouble for this latest interview because she talked about restricting Asian immigration because she was skeptical that the spirit of liberty, beat in their breasts. And I think that was a particularly strong argument. So Amy Wax does not make the case for significant biological differences between the races, but what she sees as self-evident is that there are big, cultural differences. So she tried to make a case against essentially non-white immigration. So she argued that the United States is a civilization from the West, and that when it comes to immigration, we should choose people who are most compatible with our majority population, which in practice would mean more white immigrants, fewer Asian and African and Latino immigrants. So she notices that conservatives are very scared of talking about race, right? They don't want to be called racist. But Amy Wax goes about as far as you can go and still be in the national conservatism, Yoram Hazony conference spectrum. But quite the interesting discussion between Glenn Loury and Amy Wax. I think it came out December 20th. And you're looking out Bondi Beach there, directly straight ahead. It's about 5 kilometers probably from here. So one downside with the Amy Wax Glenn Loury discussion is that they would keep interrupting each other. So they should be very WASP about it. Just allow one person to speak at a time, allow that one person to make their point, and then allow the next person to take up. G'day Robert, how are you, mate? So you're looking at the eastern suburbs of Sydney. You're looking at Bondi, and out beyond Bondi is Watson's Bay, where I was yesterday, and out beyond that is Manly. So guess what? I walked past Adam Gilchrist, like on this trail, all right? About half an hour ago, I walked past Adam Gilchrist, the former Australian wicketkeeper, and just terrific batsman. When he would score runs, it'd be at a very high rate of knots. He was like very exciting to watch. Adam Gilchrist, man, he could belt out the runs I just watched him on KO Sports. That's the live sports streaming app here in Australia, about 1 million subscribers, and they did a documentary on Monkeygate. So Andrew Symonds was a part black player on the Australian national cricket team. So Andrew Symonds, I think, had a father who was Caribbean and a mother who was Scandinavian. So Andrew Symonds could, pass for Southern European. He could almost pass for Italian. So he played for the Australian national cricket team for about 20 or 30 tests. Then in a test against India about 15 years ago, there was this Indian batsman who would call him a monkey, and Andrew Symonds took really strong exception to that, and then made an official complaint. Right? Made an official complaint about Monkeygate, and then went through the appeals process. And anyway, things didn't go Andrew Symonds' way. What does being black have to do with it? Well, it's because he was being called a monkey, so he was arguing that he was the object of racial vilification. And so initially the Indian batsman got a 3-match suspension, but then it got overturned, and like Andrew Symonds, already American Luke is fading away. So Andrew Symonds was like very quick to take offense. So when an Indian player simply patted Brett Lee, the fast bowler, Andrew Symonds went and took offense and got in the guy's face, and it was a very tense match. The umpires had made some dubious decisions that went against India. And anyway, the point of Monkeygate is that after bringing this allegation, Andrew Symonds' life kind of collapsed into alcoholism. Your face looks thinner and more weathered, like that Crocodile Dundee guy. Yeah, so his life collapsed, and a lot of sun exposure. So I got a medical checkup while I was here. I got my Australian Medicare card, and I got a couple of spots to watch for potential skin cancer. So I've been getting a ton of sun, a ton of exercise. So I walked about 12k yesterday out to Watson's Bay. So anyway, I think this is fairly common. Andrew Symonds brings this racial vilification complaint, and then because the complaint doesn't go his way, he collapses into alcoholism. He was already a heavy drinker, but he then collapses into alcoholism. It ends his professional cricket career. His life just falls apart. And I've seen this again and again. Better watch On the Beach to see what's coming. Yeah, I saw On the Beach. I saw both versions, the 1950s version and the Australian remake. So I see that. I'm not sure I've seen The Quiet Earth. So I remember this woman, this friend of mine. She was quite attractive, and she was an attorney, and she brought a complaint for sexual harassment, and it didn't go her way, and it just destroyed her life. She went from being hot and charming and outgoing and just a ton of fun, but when her sexual harassment complaint didn't go her way, her life absolutely collapsed. Sing the Waltzing Matilda. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with you. Aussie cellular sucks. Anyone else have complaints about Australian cellular production? But yeah, a lot of people bring a hot button controversial complaint like Andrew Symonds did, or my female attorney friend, right? When you bring that kind of hot button racial vilification, sexual harassment complaint, and it doesn't go your way, people are going to fight back, right? Because nobody wants to be on the losing end of such a hot button discussion, hot button controversy, and then people just fall apart. So it's all tempting to who did Georgie Girl? Yeah, Georgie Girl. She's 80 years old, mate. I'm not even sure she's still alive. So no, I'm not gonna be dating the singer of Georgie Girl. You'd be a fool to turn your back on those roots. Walking is my mental health practice. In winter I walk less. I notice I'm more depressed and anxious. Well, you can walk year round here. But I tell you one thing, in Sydney, the weather forecast, the worst I've ever seen. So today was supposed to be mostly sunny, but it was raining for much of the last hour. So the Seekers folk group. Mate, I don't date women over 40. So when they say it's raining, often it'll be sunny all day. Pretend she's still 20. And when they say it'll be sunny, you know, often it turns out raining. The most unpredictable weather here that I've ever seen. So Amy Wax. Oh yeah. So I saw an interesting article by Ezra Klein. You don't date women over 30. I actually saw an interesting article by Ezra Klein. I'm not going to deny it. And it was in the New York Times. And he talked about the difference between politics for power and politics for emotional catharsis. So I don't normally get much benefit from Ezra Klein, but here you go in the New York Times today. So this is how he starts out. Talks about a new book which I just downloaded. So in his 2020 book, Politics is for Power, Eitan Hersh, a political scientist at Tufts, sketched a day in the life of many political observers in sharp, if cruel terms. Yeah, light rain is cold, so I don't mind the rain. It's just, I can't believe the weather forecast is so inaccurate here. So this political scientist says, I refresh my Twitter feed to keep up on the latest political crisis, then toggle over to Facebook to read clickbait news stories. Yeah, not everyone, but a lot of people are fit here, and almost no fatties. So this is political scientist Eitan Hersh. Says this is his daily routine. I refresh my Twitter feed to keep up on the latest political crisis, then toggle over to Facebook to read clickbait news stories, then over to YouTube to see a montage of juicy clips from the latest congressional hearing. I then complain to my family about all the things that I don't like that I've seen. So to Eitan Hersh, that's not politics. It's what he calls political hobbyism. So is that what we're engaged in, guys? We engaged in political hobbyism rather than the bloodthirsty pursuit of power. Yes, my family would object if I married a kangaroo. So would my rabbi. So political hobbyism, right? Is that what we're doing here? It's a national pastime. So a third of Americans say they spend 2 hours or more each day on politics. So how much time do you spend each day on politics? Of these people, 4 out of 5 say that not 1 minute of that time is spent on any kind of real political work. It's all TV news and podcasts and radio shows and social media and cheering and booing and complaining to friends and family. What if the kangaroo were of the Hebraic faith? So real political work is the intentional, strategic accumulation of power in service of a defined end. It is action in service of change, not information in search of outrage, all right? So when you come here to this show, all right, this show is about service of change, action in service of change. Not so many snakes in Sydney, but more outside of Sydney, in regional Australia, right? Are you about action in service of change, or are you seeking information in service of outrage? So outrage and fury, they're only useful as a fuel for getting something done. And outrage and fury, should not be the ends. So Ezra Klein says, yeah, very few no street gangs in eastern suburbs Sydney, maybe western Sydney, but overall Sydney's like the 4th safest city in the world. So Steve Bannon has made it his mission to recruit people who don't believe in democracy to serve as municipal poll workers. So this is interesting, right? On the right, we always think that people on the right are, not paying attention to where the power lies, and that they're getting, outcompeted by the left. And Ezra Klein says, I'll say this for the right, they pay attention to where the power lies in the American system. Is that true? Does the right pay attention to where the power lies in the American system? In ways the left sometimes doesn't. Steve Bannon calls this the precinct strategy, and it's working. Suddenly people who have never before showed interest in party politics started calling the local GOP. I never get outraged. I convince myself my political interests are purely ethnographic. Disavow. I say people who've never before showed any interest in party politics started calling the local GOP headquarters, crowding into county conventions eager to enlist as precinct officers, ProPublica reports. They show up in states Trump won and in states Trump lost, in deep red rural areas, in swing voting suburbs, and in popular cities. So I didn't realize this. So is this energy transferring from Trump? Or is this independent of Trump? The difference between those organizing at the local level to shape democracy and those raging ineffectually about democratic backsliding, myself included, remind me of the old line about war. Yes, I am able to vote in Australia. Amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. So right now, Trumpists are talking logistics. Yeah, Ezra Klein is calling out the right for catching on to what the left has been doing for years. So we do not have one federal election. We have 50 state elections and then thousands of county elections, and each of those ladder up to give us results. So Congress can write some rules and boundaries for how elections are administered. State legislatures can make decisions on who can vote and not vote, but counties and towns are making decisions about how much money they're spending, what technology they're using, and the rules around which candidates can participate. Yes, it's 1:04 Monday afternoon here. And it looks like the Dallas Cowboys are going to be matching up against the San Francisco 49ers. It's a very overcast day. Like, it's hard to think that there'd be that much, radiation. Like, look at that, very, very overcast. I am wearing sunscreen. And I'm wearing my Aussie hat. Right. So, yeah, Glenn Loury, I think he's got like the edgiest show on, right, he's got the edgiest show on YouTube. Right, okay. Look at that beautiful sky. Yeah, it's like an Aussie keeper.
They were like all pinging out of the water. It's just fucking
Oh, very fair dinkum shoes, mate. Here we go. They're a bit worn, but Skeechers, very comfortable. Very fair dinkum. How much weight have you lost since arriving in Australia? At one point I was down like 7 pounds, but I think I'm pretty much back to where I was. So I'm about 165 to 168 pounds. Okay, very disturbing story here from the New York Review of Books. I hope this does not get out. So, an expert on Frantz Fanon, who was a black political activist. Adam Schatz is a white guy writing about him, and writes in the New York Review of Books that he was essentially the victim of masked polar bear hunters. Says, my attackers came out of nowhere on a familiar street and didn't even take my wallet, but they robbed me of something, a New Yorker's self-assurance. Whoa! Whoa! Thank you so much for the super chat. Very exciting. And it says there's something morbidly instructive about being beaten up by people who are obviously relishing your humiliation. This is in the New York Review of Books. It's on top of Steve Saylor's blog. To read about the pleasure people have taken in cruelty is not the same as experiencing it firsthand. So it just was published January 7th. Before I set upon, assaulted and robbed at roughly 9:15 p.m., half-block from my girlfriend's building in Chelsea, I had been having a rather good day. I just outlined the last chapters of my book on Frantz Fanon, radical West Indian author of The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Masks. So let's have a look at... the Mighty Puck. There are tons of lefty prosecutors in moderate towns because the left realized turnout is crazy low and some funding and turnout effort is effective. Exactly. So maybe the right is learning from the left on how to do politics. So this white guy wrote a couple of books on this radical West Indian activist. And he was feeling a surge of adrenaline after writing his book. So he put on his headphones to listen to a podcast conversation with his friend Randall Kennedy about his new book on race and civil rights, Say It Loud. Randy's voice was the last thing I heard as I turned right on West 17th Street and 9th Avenue, where my attackers were lying in wait. There were 3 young men, barely old enough to be called that, 16 or 17, and almost immediately I was on the pavement. I don't know if I was jumped or if I was thrown to the ground. What I remember is a thud, the sound of my body meeting the concrete. Well, not a lot of this in Sydney. As soon as I fell, they began taking turns kicking and punching me in my stomach, my upper thigh, the right side of my waist. They didn't say anything. What I do remember is their laughter. They were chuckling amongst themselves as I absorbed the blows. Their voices sounded youthful and immature, and they moved like gangling teenagers. But they knew something that had never occurred to me, that my prone, defenseless body could be the source of considerable entertainment. And then I got to disavow, he names the race of his assailants. And then the article cuts off because of the New York Review of Books. Yeah, Tinsborg on Twitter talks humiliation robberies in Sweden. They have a word for it. And then, yeah, a lot of humiliation crime going on in Sweden as well as New York City and other places. So society encouraging masked men to roam the streets. At the same time, society is encouraging certain groups to feel extremely aggrieved towards white people is a recipe for polar bear hunting. Sounds like a scene from A Clockwork Orange, yeah. Like, it would never occur to me that beating someone up could just be, great entertainment. But apparently it is. And these people vote for Alvin Bragg, right? I think you say they never learn. I think they will. Right? I think they will. Even people on the left get tired of get tired of massive amounts of crime. Science Museum boards up display on early human migration because it is non-inclusive. Man, how did the woke take over all the museums? Oh, did you guys know that NPR is having a white supremacy crisis? So all these black players at NPR have quit. So Crystal Marie Fleming says the problem at NPR is white supremacy. That so few are saying this explicitly is telling indeed. But yes, very telling indeed. So Audie Cornish, host of All Things Considered, is leaving NPR. She wrote on Twitter, she's joining many of you in the Great Resignation. So did you guys realize that NPR was all about white supremacy? Then interesting academic study here. Half of blacks say they prefer to be robbed or burglarized than to have unprovoked contact with cops. So they'd rather be robbed by their own kind than have to deal with the police. So Steve Saylor writes about the lost age of Los Angeles triumphalism. Yeah, we can't have evolved that much since the 16th century. People back then loved public executions and humiliations as well as animal torture and bear baiting. So do you remember the 1985 TV series Half Nelson? Starred Joe Pesci, plus 3 NFL football players, Dick Butkus, Bubba Smith. So Los Angeles was really fashionable from about 1984 to 1990. And the 1984 Olympics turned out to be great, the embodiment of morning in America. And Los Angeles triumphalism basically reigned until Dick Cheney turned off the aerospace budget spigot, writes Steve Saylor, after the fall of the Soviet Union, which ushered in Los Angeles' 1990s time of troubles of riot, earthquake, and O.J. Simpson. And do big football players still get cast in TV shows? Right, that was a big thing in the 1970s and 1980s. Oh, so there's a new documentary, Expedition Content, and it's about the making of a famous old 1963 anthropology documentary, Dead Birds. about tribal warfare in New Guinea. And this new documentary has almost no images because you wouldn't want to stereotype the headhunters looking like headhunters. So expedition content, virtually no images about tribal warfare.
Speak to Stroke Australia in Tasmania.
I mean, who cares about New Guinea headhunters, right? Really boring. So Michael Rockefeller, the son of the sitting New York governor, almost certainly got eaten by these headhunters in New Guinea, and New York Times does not mention this in their review. Because why would anyone be interested in learning that young Mr. Rockefeller was devoured by cannibals? Oh, so ex-man swimmer Leah Thomas finally loses a women's swimming race to a streamlined ex-woman. Regular women's swimmers left in the dust. So now in women's sports, various ex-men are now winning. Is Adam Schatz of the Hebraic persuasion? I'm not sure. Sure sounds like it. Wow. Shootings in Sweden are up 1,268% since Angela Merkel's mistake back in 2015. Who would have thought that shootings in Sweden would go up 1,268 points? Elliot Blatt, you don't care about out groups? Bro. I'm not sure you're allowed to say that. Base cannibals. I remember LA in the 2000s. Skid Row was terrifying, but Venice Beach was pacified. Semi-pacified. There are lots of people in New York who won't put up with polar bear hunting. Russians, Hispanics, Dominicans, Muslims. And then they're going to keep putting up with Alvin Bragg, the left-wing DA, right? Scrolling through the chat. I never get outraged. I convince myself my political interests are purely ethnographic, says the mighty Buck. Yeah, not many street gangs here. One of the safest cities in the world. Twitter is pure entertainment for 99.9% of users. Joe Klein is smart, but a hack. He's a good bellwether of the wonk left. Yeah, he's occasionally interesting. Defend the Constitution, it defends you. Walking is my mental health practice. You'd be a fool to turn your back on your roots, mate. I want to see you with a chum bucket. Ford ain't coming back to LA. I need to watch The Quiet Earth. Don't remember seeing that. Okay, I must walk on.